Yo, what's going on, everyone? It's Brian and Jim here with DrinkABeerandPlayAGame, and today we're checking out Gun.Smoke for the NES.
Originally released to arcades in 1985, this was once again developed and published by Capcom. In Japan, it's known as Gun.Smoke.
That's what it's known as in English. You just threw a goddamn offensive accent on top of it.
But Brian, I had to do the bit somehow.
I approve.
Yay! Anyway.
No, I don't.
Ah! Damn it, he tricked me! This was ported to the NES, the Amstrad CPC, the MSX, for collections on the PlayStation, PlayStation 2, Xbox, and Sega Saturn, as well as ports to the IBM PC and the ZX Spectrum.
Oh, the ZX, that's good.
I was waiting for that. This is, oh wow, another vertically scrolling shooter. But this one is unique in a lot of ways from 1943. Let's get into it.
As I mentioned in the review for 1943, this is another game that I don't really think captures what all Capcom has to offer. And to be fair, it's tough to do it with a vertical scrolling game like this. Each level is different. However, as you're going to notice, and I'll touch on in the gameplay, the levels do repeat, and a lot of it just ends up looking the same. Levels such as this, you're just seeing the grass and the gravel or dirt, and it can become an eye strain at times. The enemies, you might have up to 4 or 5 varieties per level, but because they throw so many at you, you really can't even appreciate them, and there can be a bit of flickering once you have too much going on the screen at one time. With that being said, the game still manages to not slow down. The flicker is really the only issue here, and I have to give it kudos for that. So looking at our scores, I gave it a 6, Jim gave it a 5. I appreciate that the later levels did start changing up the enemy types and gave you a little bit more variety. When it comes to beer, I'm just going to add 1 because I would have liked to seen a little bit more detail into some of these areas.
Alright, the sound. Alright, I guess I'll start as I do for most of these NES games, and with the sound effects. Again, it's kind of weak. I understand it's, the 8-bit era, but the fact that most of the guns sound the same except for basically how fast they're firing, it's a little bit of a letdown. And the enemies, their attack patterns, if they have any sounds, are barely there at all. Again, the bright spot is the music, but the music's not bad in this game, but it's just really not that memorable or even really that well composed. It's not bad by any means, but it gets the job done, it is enjoyable, but it's nothing you'll be humming after. When it comes to scores, Brian gave it an 8, I gave it a 7. There's really not that much to complain about here. Brian enjoyed it a little bit more than I did. And when it comes to beers, I'll just add, I don't know, I guess 1 beer for the lack of varied sound effects. Alright, the control. So the arcade game had a 3-button control scheme where you shot to the left, to the right, and straight ahead. The NES had a clever way around this where 1 button shoots to the left, 1 shoots to the right, and holding both of them shoots straight ahead. And you know what? It works really well. You have special weapons that you go to, that you switch out of by going into the menu, so if you're used to shit like Mega Man, this won't be anything new to you. Honestly, there's not a lot to complain about, except for the fact that outside of the machine gun, you're going to be killing your fingers by tapping the buttons. So an NES Max or Advantage or Turbo Function on an emulator is a must. Outside of that, damn near perfect control scheme, so we both gave it 9s. And when it comes to beer, I'm just going to add 1 beer for ow my fingies!
Are you just looking for me to smack you now, you son of a bitch?
Sometimes I get a little bored.
Why do I think you like it at this point?
I didn't say stop.
God damn it! The gameplay. Even though I'm going to touch a little bit in originality right now, I have to say, this was a really unique game experience for the time and still to this day. It is a basic vertical scrolling shooter, but it adds in elements of being able to buy the equipment, as Jim alluded to, and the only way you get to the end is by finding this one-hit poster. Now, I should say there are 2 ways to get this one-hit poster, and you could either find it in a random barrel after enough time, or buying it from one of the merchants. It is pretty goddamn expensive, so I actually found that finding it was always a bit easier, because you really want to save those merchants for buying better guns, or the horse, and along the way you can find some power-ups and additional bullets for these added weapons, but you just got to be careful. So it is one-hit kills, which can make the game pretty tough, but it's not unfair. Now granted, later stages will get completely insane, as you first start off in what you would call a standard western town, and then all of a sudden you're taking on American Indians, and then you're taking on ninjas. Shit gets crazy, and the terrain just continues to get more constricting, and then all of a sudden you add in falling boulders. There's a lot going on, so you really need to have great hand-eye coordination. All that being said, this is a game that actually will take a little bit of time. You're not going to completely speed through it, so we can see how that turns some people off, but we loved it just the same. I gave it an 8 and Jim gave it a 7. I was willing to stick through it because I really found it an enjoyable experience, continuing to go through the levels and trying to find the easiest way to the boss, and some of these bosses will make you want to rip your goddamn hair out. So for that reason alone, I'm going to add 2 beers. The Originality. Well, I already kind of covered this in gameplay and Jim covered it in control, but as we said, number 1, this was a very unique control scheme, and to our eyes, there's not really any other NES games that did a style like this. We can appreciate that it was trying to emulate the arcade games so well, and it pulled it off. Add on the fact that you have the re-looping levels until you get that one-hit poster, and it felt like a new enough experience, and when you compare it to other shooters, it stands out a bit. So, we both gave it a 5. It's nothing too crazy, but we applaud where it did show innovation. And when it comes to beer, I'm not going to add any. We like what this game did.
Alright, replayability. Not like there's different endings, but the game's tough, so you have to play through it a bunch of times to actually beat it, and you do have the ability to have different ways of unlocking the bosses, so it's basically however you want to go about it, so we gave it 4s. And when it comes to beers, I'm a little thirsty, so I'll add 2 beers for 2 ways to find bosses. Why not?
So overall, this is a great game. And quite honestly, it's one of the most unique vertical scrolling shooters in the NES catalog. I mean, between the control scheme, the looping, and just the fun you're going to have, a lot of these other vertical scrolling shooters tend to be just remember where things come out of. This game constantly changes it up, so it really is just hand-eye coordination. And you're not going to lie, there always is a little bit of luck thrown in with some of these levels if you find that one-hit poster a little quicker. So I really appreciate those elements in this game, and you can't really knock this for having bad control or being unfair. You just got to get really good at it, and you'll enjoy yourself. So when it comes to scores, I gave it an 8 and Jim gave it a 7. This is not a game that's going to be quite as easy to pick up as 1943 and just play through. You're going to have to dedicate some time to it. So, when we combined all of our scores together, it rounds out to a 7.4. We'd have to say this is still probably one of the more overlooked entries in the Capcom catalog because it goes up against the Mega Man series and DuckTales, but don't get it wrong, this is a great game, so try it out. When it comes to beer pairing, I'm going with the Evil Twin Brewing's The Cowboy. Yes, obviously the name gave it away, but this here is a smoked beer, and when you're going around smoking all those fools, you need a beer that can compliment you, because you're a man. So make sure you pick up at least 1 bottle of this hefty son of a bitch, and enjoy yourself. As always guys, thanks for checking out this video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you give us a thumbs up, leave some comments, or better yet, why not subscribe? Till next time guys, cheers.